We've discussed this a little bit in the podcast in the past, that not all cognitive tasks are created equal. So, for example, uh, my reading of the literature was wasn't any evidence that doing crossword puzzles is necessarily going to do anything for you other than make you better at doing crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
But dancing, no, that's a bit different actually,
Mhm.
because no two steps are ever exactly the same. You're always sort of problem solving, especially if it's sort of complicated dance. Um, you know, Solving a business problem is more elaborate than doing Sudoku or whatever it's called, where it's, they're
Mhm.
just sort of little predictable word games. And so, would you agree that maybe what you replace it with, there's also some variability in the complexity of that? And the less color by numbers or paint by numbers it is, the more likely it is to, well, let's use that example. Painting by numbers versus painting, right? You're both painting, but in one case,
Yeah.
it's a much higher level of cognitive load.
Yeah. And I think there are two streams of evidence that maybe support this. So one is around cognitive activities performed on a computer. So there are a number of different ways to do online brain training. There's a system called Brain HQ, which probably has the best evidence to support it. It was actually developed by one of the researchers who sort of did a whole bunch of the sort of primary basic research in terms of how we learn in the first place back in the 90s. And they have some nice data that shows that if you do these complex training games, which are often reacting to something or shifting focus, right? They require you to be, they're very interactive. Then you can see parallel improvements in things like verbal memory and executive function. So things that you actually care about in real life. You're not just getting better at the game,
Yep.
you're getting better at certain cognitive functions, which is what you really care about.
And that program is called what?
Brain HQ.
And that's something that people would do online. That's like a game you would play online.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a subscription service. I have no relationship with it. But in terms of online brain training systems, it's been used in a bunch of clinical studies. It's probably the best evidenced one in terms of creating sort of translational improvements in function. And then related to that, there are also studies using video games where if you randomize people to play Solitaire versus Angry Birds versus Mario 3D, like the 3D game results in better improvements in working memory, and there is some response inhibition, which is a version of executive function. So the more complex, the more interactive something is, it seems to be the greater the improvements in cognitive function associated with it. Then related to that is work in physical activity. So you mentioned dancing. There are studies that have compared dancing to circuit training that is as cardiovascularly challenging, but obviously without that element of social interaction, music, movement, steps, reacting.
Yep.
And you see better improvements in the dancing group. And some people have termed this open skill versus closed skill physical activity. So closed skill is, unidirectional, doing the same thing again and again. So like sitting on an exercise bike inside, you're not doing anything else at the same time except maybe listening to a podcast, versus say table tennis or badminton. So the physical nature of it, the cardiovascular stimulus is the same, but you're not reacting to the environment and other people. And when you do those open skill type of physical activities, you seem to see some greater improvements in cognitive abilities. So there are those various things that say that the more domains or the more complex the interaction, associated with the activity, the greater the associated improvements.
Yeah, the more variability there is, right? It's, to be able to walk outside on an uneven surface where, the slope is constantly changing, and you kind of have to be able to physically and cognitively be aware of what's beneath your feet. It's going to be a lot better for you than walking on a treadmill or even walking around a track in circles.